Hello and welcome along to another episode of the Tack and Sport podcast. And it's Daniel here, as always, joined by my brother Sean. Sean, how are you getting on?
Oh, good.
Good, good. Listen, we're here after an Ireland victory and a pretty decent international window overall. It seems all rosy in the garden for Stephen Kenny. So I guess we've had a bumpy 12 to 18 months, but I guess now you can kind of look at it and go, you know what, we've kind of gone through it, and there's positives to take, and they're starting to get a bit more of consensus around this Irish team, which is only positive, sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while coming, but as I said on last week's show, I didn't think that this international break was kind of make or break. It wasn't going to be a defining one. Um, Look, it's great to end the campaign on a positive. I think that from where he was in March, having looked at a few different articles from back then. But it's just been an improvement. It's been a couple of different players being given different roles. We've mentioned it on this show, how the makings of the team has just started to evolve, and we're seeing the core group of players fit into the system, and then you can work around when Coleman's back fit, or you can work around maybe chopping into Stevens or McLean, or even that front three. Now you can play two up front like we did for the last 25 minutes or so in Luxembourg. So everything around it is starting to shape up. I think when the whole fiasco when he took the job and the succession plan, I don't think his help matters, but he slowly, Stephen Kenny, got to into his work. I think you can really see the whole thing is starting to come together. I think between the staff, as Noah spoke, one of the goals, Kenny kind of hugging Dean Kiley and Anthony Barry and Keith Andrews, and I think we can really start to see the work that has been done on the training ground, that because of the extra camps, because of the couple of friendlies, particularly that one, I think against Andorra when they got the shackles of the first win off, everything just slowly starting to grow. Now that being said, I thought Luxembourg were really poor. I kind of had to look at and check the names of some of the players. That keeper didn't play in Dublin because, thank God, because if he did and we didn't score against him in Dublin, there would have to be questions asked. The the key, I think, and Liam Brady's touched on, and he's got a little bit of stick. I think the key will come when we've to beat, maybe an Albania, like now Albania, now Mugs, and now England beat them well, but they got 16 points in their group, or we've to beat a Scotland, or we've to beat a Czech Republic, or a side that is kind of, some of the results, some of the sides we've always been good at getting results again. You think of Austria, when they were in our group. When it comes next year in the European qualification campaign or the following year, those are the sides that we're going to have to beat, I think, if we're to qualify, because we're always going to be third, fourth seeds in a group, and you've got to get into the top couple of positions. So I think that's really the key for me at the moment. We've beaten some of the, the really poor sides, and we've got a couple of good results against Serbia, who have proven against Portugal there the other night that they're no mugs. And the one thing I would say is we've taken points off everyone in the group at some stage or another. And the frustrating thing, I think, is the campaign being over so early on. I think losing to Luxembourg, we knew we were never qualifying. I think, to be honest, we knew maybe at the start of the year we weren't qualifying from the group. But that being said, there is a positive to it. You look at some of the key performances over the last couple of games have been by young players and players that have been given the opportunity, and even players like Callum Robinson that have just fit into a position nicely and have got a couple of goals and have used those friendly games to good effect. And where we were, like I said, in March, we are, we're a different side to that, and the makings of a solid starting 11 there, and I think that is what will please Stephen Kenny most. And the players, the players were always going to come under criticism, but I think ultimately it was Stephen Kenny who was, taking the brunt of it. But it almost feels like the players are just playing with a whole different ethos, a whole different idea. They're just so confident, I think, at the moment in the current system we have. And even at times in the game against Luxembourg, I thought we were poor. And then for 5 or 10 minutes, we just got on the ball. And Jeff Hendrick, who I think had a really big last half an hour or so, and just moments like that, and all of a sudden we clicked into gear. So I still think there's an awful long way for this team to go, an awful long way for the Stephen Kinney era to go. But if you had told me in March that he'd have the support like he does now, I would have been completely shocked because I thought Stephen Kenny was heading for the early exit.
Yeah, you mentioned the group, and I guess we were unlucky in a way to get Portugal and Serbia. We were also probably unlucky to get a 5-team group instead of a 6-team group. Like you take England's group, for example, you would have had Andorra as the 5th seed and San Marino as the 6th seed. Instead, we got Azerbaijan as the 5th seed, who are arguably a lot better than Andorra. So, and even the top 2 teams were very superior. Then even you fancy getting a bit more points off maybe Poland. And I do think the group kind of didn't go in our favour. Like Paddy Daly on Facebook here said, a good comment here, and keep your comments coming in, that Ireland massively missed the 12th man when Kenny first took over. And you do forget that that Luxembourg game was only when Richie Sadler said on air that was played in front of an empty stadium. And you see the difference against the Portugal and even the Serbia game, the difference the crowd makes. And even another comparison to Northern Ireland, but the fact that Connor Swords here on YouTube, that they've gone unbeaten without conceding a goal the whole campaign. They really played well tonight against Italy and got the result. It does show you that the players are one thing, but it's really just if you can go about and put a system together, get the fans on side, like you mentioned with the back five, that it really makes a massive difference.
Yeah, and it feels like Stephen Kenny stumbled across this and the stars have kind of aligned, and you look at Anthony Barry and his work with Thomas Tuchel at Chelsea, and obviously the whole system there is 5-3 or 5-2-3 over different variants of it, and I think we've stumbled across it. And it was touted a little bit under Mick McCarthy that we had, for example, a ready-made back five there at the time, which would have been the one we saw in the early international in the first game of the camp. You have Darty a right wing back, Seamus Coleman a right centre back, Shane Duffy, John Egan, and then the Stevens. And under Mick McCarthy, they were all playing 5 at the back. And one of the biggest criticisms I had early on of Stephen Kenny was his chopping and changing of his midfield 3 when he wanted to play a 4-3-3, which is what he just kind of made his mark with Dundalk on, and what he did so well with the under-21s was that 4-3-3 kind of orthodox system. And the midfield balance he couldn't get right. They just couldn't find a position really for any of them. James McCarthy played a couple of games there. You had Hendrick, Hourahan, Robbie Brady, and the 2 in midfield at the moment seems to be complementing themselves really well. I mentioned Jeff Hendrick earlier. Watching the last couple of games, particularly against Portugal, when Hendrick, he didn't go hiding, particularly in that first half against Portugal. He never went hiding. I thought he always wanted to receive the ball from his back 3. And I think Josh Cullen does that role really well on his own. And he protects and he reads where the ball is going to break, and he kind of recycles possession well for Ireland. But when Hendrick's playing with confidence and he's playing with that kind of ability to make a difference, I really think Ireland are a much better side. And when he stepped it up a little, for that 10-minute period against Luxembourg, he really showed how important he is to Ireland. And like I said, that first half against Portugal, particularly that last 20 minutes of the first half, I really saw him want the ball under pressure, take the ball with his back to facing his own goal, rather trying to progress the ball for Ireland. And that's what I was really happy with Jeff Hendrick, because he has come under a lot of criticism, and he had that brilliant performance, albeit against Qatar. And the last couple of games have kind of proved to me that Ireland are a better side at the moment with Jeff Hendrick, and they're a better team, and they play well when Jeff Hendrick is playing well.
And it's a big call from Kenny to back Jeff Hendrick, wasn't it? And considering even now, I can still see the abuse he gets, and no matter how well he plays, because he's never going to be that player that scores the goal. So without scoring goals and assists, you'll always get a skeptic that no matter how well you play in centre midfield, they'll always say you're not playing well. And I do think Jeff Hendrick has that baggage with him, that no matter how well he plays, he's going to get the criticism. But I thought he was absolutely outstanding, and he was trying passes that if they didn't come off, it didn't stop him. And we saw that with the second goal, how those passes, I think he'd given the ball away just before, and then he managed to find that pass. It's very positive. And I'd also throw James McLean in that on a lesser scale. Obviously more abuse from it, but he's definitely improved, and he's playing well for Wigan this season. But to be honest with you, a lot of Ireland fans wouldn't know that, and they just kind of see McLean or Hendrick turn up, they see the name, and then we've sat in stadiums where they're getting abused, and I think it's happening a lot more online as well. And I think as Irish fans, they've really got to really back these players because Stephen Kenny, and they're backing a lot of the new players, but everyone wanted rid of Jeff Hendrick. But we've seen now that was definitely the right call from Stephen Kenny to keep him in there. And as I said, on lesser scale, James McLean's playing better than Enda Stevens at the moment, both at club level and now at international level.
Yeah, and the thing with another important thing with Stephen Kenny, like and Richie Sadler's mentioned this a lot, he's been kind of fighting against players not playing and being out of a choice at their club. And there's a lot of those Ireland players who are going to have a choice to make at the end of the season. You know, Conor Howrahan is on loan at Sheffield United, probably not getting the 100% minutes that he'd want. You know, he's had to come off the bench at times this year. He's had a decent impact with them. You look at him, you look at Aaron Connolly at the end of the year, and there's a few others there that you're thinking, Matt Doherty as well. They're going to have to make a decision, Adam Ida. So that's been the kind of impressive thing in the last couple of games, is how Matt Doherty has probably been Ireland's most consistent performer, certainly in the last 6-7 games, and he's not playing a whole heap at club level. So how Stephen Kenny's been able to get a kind of a tune out of him, there's been a couple of times, I think it was the Portugal away game, where he was cramping up because he did just the sheer lack of minutes. So that's been impressive with Stephen Kenny. How he's handled Shane Duffy, again, is another key factor. And what I have to stress about Stephen Kenny, and you see it, and it comes across so often, and even in his interview with Tony yesterday on when I was at Sunday night, where the Ireland fans are singing "There's only one Stephen Kenny," and he's almost embarrassed hearing it, because Stephen Kenny it's never been about him. It's always been about the players. It's always been about empowering players. It's always been about having a system that enables every player he has to flourish. It was a key component of his time with Dundalk, and I think that's proven in how many of those players went over and, you know, tried their luck in England and were able to, you know, earn good money out of it. You know, some of them have come back to the league in the last few years, but they're certainly better for playing under Stephen Kenny. It was the same at the 21s. He's made some of those players in the 21s level much better in the system they're in. And I found it very noticeable in one of his very first press conferences, and I think it might have even been his first press conference, Stephen Kenny reiterated the fact how he was kind of embarrassed at the fact that John Egan at the time had only a handful of caps. And Stephen Kenny had mentioned how he should have been playing for Ireland for 3 or 4 years previous to that, when he was at Brentford and his first couple of years at Sheffield United. And he's always been about that. And even in his press conferences, you know, he mentioned the fact a couple of weeks ago how John Egan could be playing Champions League football. He's mentioned how good a player Shane Duffy is. And he's always about that, Stephen Kenny. And that's the thing, when one of the main reasons I think a lot of people have stuck with him is because they know Stephen Kenny's not here to kind of make his few bob and, you know, sail into the sunset. Stephen Kenny's, you know, you struggle to find as passionate a man about Irish football as about development and players. And I think that's been the key factor in him. He's got a tune out of those players. Even when Shane Duffy was really struggling at club level and he had the horrendous year, you know, on and off the pitch, you know, he still was able to keep him in the camps, keep him connected to the Irish side. And he never really hung him under the bus. And that's what Stephen Kenny is. He's a people's person. He's a player's person. I'm sure every one of those players absolutely loves working with Keith Andrews. And I think that's the thing that so many Irish fans have got behind, is the fact that you're not looking at a mercenary. You're not looking at someone here who's come to piggyback, you know, and get his few bob, like I said, and have the life that international football management is, that, you know, the value for money is great, I'm sure. But Stephen Kenny is as passionate a man, and he's like I said, he's a players manager. He looks after his players. He backs his players the whole way through. And if you want proof of that, you just have to look at some of the quotes from the press conferences when Ireland were really struggling.
Yeah, and what I was actually going to bring up, this week's press conference, and how personally him and his management team took the fact, the British style comments, and even Ogbene looking on as Kenny was answering. That's what I was going to kind of bring up, if you want to touch on a bit of that.
Yeah, like that, like Stephen Kenny, those players will run through brick walls for him. And I think the one thing that was labelled at him, and it was mentioned by a few different people, and their names can't for whatever reason spring to mind, but a lot of people said, look, he's a League of Ireland manager. The players don't know him. The players won't know who Dundalk are. Some of the English based players who've been over there for a while won't know what he's done at Dundalk. And you look at you think of three of the most senior players in the Irish setup, I would say, Shane Duffy, Seamus Coleman, and James McLean. And I'm sure you asked any one of those three players, and you only have to look at their comments during press conferences. All three of those players would run through a brick wall for Stephen Kenny. So that whole point about him being a League of Ireland manager, or him being, not up to it, I think has been eroded over time, and that has been certainly one of the key components. Those senior players, and they've really stuck by him, and Stephen Kenny stuck by them, and he's always, given James McLean a key role, and James McLean hasn't really let him down in the last few weeks, or the last few games rather. So that's one of the key things with Stephen Kenny. Like I reiterate, he's a people's player, or he's a player's manager. And you look at that, you look at the likes of Jason Knight and Troy Parrott and Ogbene and Amadama Bele and Nathan Collins, Bazunu. These have all been given a go because of Stephen Kenny. They owe their international careers to Stephen Kenny. He's given them the leap. Bazunu, I think, has he 9 or 10 caps for Ireland at his age. Jason Knight is similar. Adam Ida is similar. So these players are being really trusted by the manager, and hopefully they'll repay him in the next couple of years with qualification. And I think ultimately that's what Stephen Kenny will be judged on, particularly in the media. Can he qualify for the next Euros? But those players, like I said, when it comes to it, I think they'll really up their gears and get ready for a real crack at the European qualification.
It's an exciting team to watch, but even forget all the football they're trying to play. It's an exciting team to get behind just on the personnel. And like you mentioned there, the experienced players, the likes of Shane Duffy, James McLean, Seamus Coleman, those three that you mentioned, but also the young players are so easy to get behind. And what my problem with previous management is, like, Gavin Bazunu wouldn't be getting a look in, Keller wouldn't be getting a look in, and Mark Travers wouldn't be getting a look in. In fact, Darren Randolph would still be number one at Ireland. Now, Darren Randolph's a very good keeper, and he would be doing a very good job. But in 4 or 5 years' time, you'd be left with 3 goalkeepers that haven't got any international experience. 19 and now they're 24, 25. You look at Oma Bambadeli wouldn't have got a look in, Adam Ida wouldn't have got a look in, Jason Knight wouldn't have got a look in. And I just think, forget the football Stephen Kenny's trying to play. I just think the whole supporting this Irish team now is you're supporting players. You feel like if a lad's playing well, he's going to be in the team. And I really think he's also got that balance, though, the fact that last thing that you said, Matt Doherty wasn't playing, but he knows he needs him at right wing back or left wing back because we don't have alternative options. So I think he's got the balance right between picking players on form, but also really prioritizing younger players, which I think you have to do if you want to, in 2 or 3 years' time, have a team or basis of a team that you can try and build and try and play a bit of football against some proper teams that we'll be coming up against in the next campaign.
What I would say is, in that regard, Mick McCarthy didn't inherit a great squad, and then maybe the biggest fall in the Martin O'Neill era was how it ended, but is the lack of games and the Stevens, Conor Howard, guys of that age,
John
of
Egan,
that kind, John Egan of that stature. So Mick McCarthy inherited a pretty, a lot of players in round holes, in square pegs. So
well, Mick McCarthy's era was so short, to be fair. Like his second era, like it's 10 games or thereabouts. Like, and the Martin O'Neill era is a tough one to talk about because that first couple of years was brilliant, and the memories that we got. We did get a bounce of a ball here and there in terms of finishing third in the group, which incidentally we finished third in the group this time around. Just saying, it was an easier campaign. Things went our way, but once we got to the Euros and that performance against Italy, there are memories there that Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane were able to get out of the players. But I think that, like you said, there were missed opportunities. There are lads playing there and then other lads who were playing on form that weren't getting a look in. And with this team, it feels like I said, if you're playing well at club level, you're going to get a look in, and it's just going to be completely fair. And as I said, the prioritizing the younger players, like by right, Gavin Bazunu shouldn't have been in at all, and by right, Darren Randolph should still be in the squad. But I think a long-term view has been taken by Kenny that other managers, and it's also just, I saw like a funny quote, like if Martin O'Neill or Mick McCarthy team was playing against Luxembourg, whatever scoreline would have been, 2-1, or maybe it could have been 3-0 either, like, because they weren't great, but there wouldn't been the building up our players at the end of the game, or we try to play the ball, like, you know what I mean? It just, there seems to be such a positive aspect to this Irish team and supporting this Irish team from the fans,
Absolutely, and when when you're watching some of these players, there is that element of, it's probably similar to watching some teams at the moment where you're watching these players knowing that in 6 or 7 years' time, this core nucleus of the team is still going to be there. And even for the next campaign, I don't think there's any one of those Ireland players that isn't going to be available. Seamus Cole might be, 33, 34, but whatever, he's still kicking a ball in the Premier League for Everton. He's going to be there for his country. And, I have to mention it, Tan. I have to mention Gavin Bazunu, because goalkeeping is kind of an art form. They do everything on their own. And, I've always found it interesting, because I remember when Chiedozie was on loan at Brentford from Arsenal, how young goalkeepers rarely get chances at big clubs, and they rarely get the opportunity even at lower league clubs, because it's the one position where a split second, like Gavin Bazunu had last year for Rochdale, and you lose the game and everyone's looking at you. But having watched him now in an Ireland jersey, and haven't seen what people have said about him, because I remember when he kind of took his opportunity for the 21s when I think Caoimhín Kelleher got called up. I don't think I've seen a goalkeeper, excluding someone like a Donnarumma, who is one of the best in the world. I don't think I've seen that conviction in a goalkeeper at someone who's 19 or 20 years of age. Every time I watch him I just feel so confident in him. Every time he gets the ball at his feet, he looks like he's composed. When he comes for crosses, maybe that's probably his biggest weakness at the moment, and that will come with a couple of years experience and a couple of more blows when you're going up for catching and that kind of thing. But his shot stopping, I mean, it's phenomenal. And that save he made in the Luxembourg game, you think of the penalty save against Ronaldo, you think of that performance against Serbia, and that was the first time I really took note, because I was in the Aviva, I was behind the goal in the south stand, and the save after save, I really think he is going to be a superstar. And I don't know what it is. I was only thinking of it the other day. I don't know what it is with the goalkeeping position for Ireland, but I can't remember ever watching a goalkeeper for Ireland and not feeling comfortable with them. Darren Randolph's performances for Ireland were outstanding. There was a time where Damien Ford was in goal, and he was brilliant for Ireland for that qualifying campaign. We've obviously had Shay Given going back. You see the clips of Packy Bonner saving Tom Ofty's penalty. I just think with Gavin Bazunu, he is like, I don't think there's a goalkeeper at his age anywhere that can boast what he has, and I think the key has for him, it's very easy for a lot of these players, and Caoimhín Kelleher is going to be in this position next year where very easy being a number two, and it's not criticism of Caoimhín Kelleher, very easy playing academy football and under 23 football and making a save against Brighton and putting it on a Brighton underage team and putting it up on your Instagram. Like Gavin Bazunu has gone out to Rochdale, he's gone out to Portsmouth, and he's learned the harsh realities of being a lower league goalkeeper, and I think the sky's the limit for him. I really do.
Yeah, well, Courtois was the first one that sprung to mind, and he came on the scene maybe a couple of years older. But like Bazunu's made errors for Portsmouth. I've seen clips of them, but like you said, Sean, like they're amplified in his head, so he has to learn from them, because he's got I don't know the layout of the Pompey team, but he's got like lads to twilight out their careers that are trying to earn a living here, that have bonuses if the Pompey get promoted, Pompey get relegated, how they do for the rest of the season. So he's got the whole dressing room to rely on, like we talked about in this podcast ample time. And for Kelleher, it's such a tough decision to leave Liverpool, especially, like you said, clubs aren't always looking for keepers like Kelleher and Bazunu. So there might have been a situation where the right club didn't come along and Klopp just insisted Kelleher stay. But if it happens next season and the season after that, like for Bazunu to get in ahead of Ederson, he's going to have another couple of seasons away. In fact, it'll probably be a championship club next season. It won't even be, it might not be Premier League for 3 or 4 years. He's going to have to be so patient, because he's come on the scene equivalent of like a 15, 16-year-old outfield player, if you get me, because the goalkeeping is a lot older, obviously.
Well, you look at Aaron Ramsdale now, he's 23, and he's had, he had a loan spell at Wimbledon, he had a couple of years at Sheffield United and Bournemouth, and it's only now that he's playing for one of the big clubs in the Premier League. With Bazunu, it's going to be an awful long time before he gets to Man City number one. He might have to go somewhere else to make his career. It's like Caoimhín Kelleher has got time on his side. He's got an unbelievable experience there training alongside Alisson and being Liverpool's number two. But I just think what Gavin Bazunu has gone out and done. I mean, he really like I think it's staggering. You only realize how young he is sometimes when you see him interviewed and you see him speak. And he made his debut against Luxembourg, or his competitive debut against Luxembourg, and you think of that as one of the biggest low points, and certainly of our memory of watching Ireland. You know, you might think of a couple, the San Marino game where Stephen Ireland scored or whatever, but that particular night felt like a massive low point. It was a manager under the biggest pressure you might ever see. And even in his post-match interview, Gavin Bazunu, he was so calm and commanding. And like I don't think I really don't think we've had a young talent, certainly in my memory of watching someone at 17 or 18 or 19 who is one of the best players at his age group in the world. And it's a long time for Bazunu to hit his peak or to, you know, play Premier League football or Champions League football. But the way he's going, I'm sure there's a lot of clubs, particularly next year in the Championship or the Premier League or even further afield, who are looking at this guy and seeing his performances, seeing his saves. He's got everything. He's good at saving penalties. You know, that's when a lot of people would have first heard of him, his penalty save against Kieran Sadlier down at Turner's Cross. And everything about him, he's just so likable. He seems down to earth. You know, obviously he's still a massive Shamrock Rovers fan.
He was at the one of the games last week, wasn't it?
And I think he was at the Under-19 Cup game they had. Just everything about him, and I think he's going right to the very top.
Yeah, and on that, like, even like it's a thing that might seem silly, but like a big football account, I think Football for All or someone tweeted it out, serious traction online, people saying, you know, better safe than Ramsdale. Obviously a bit of back and forth, and again, that stuff doesn't really matter in one sense, but in another sense it matters hugely for his reputation around the world. And it, as a goalkeeping there, the way he kind of reset his feet so quickly and then made the save, it's hard to describe without having the clip in front, but it was amazing, and in my opinion was a better save than Ramsdale, given the deflection, given that he had to move, and it didn't even look that unreal until we had that back to goal angle, which shows you the importance of angles at times. But for him now, I'm really hopeful of a Championship club next season, at the very least, for him to get first team foot. But it's critical. He's got to be the number one from the start, and then he can build his career. Because, like you said, playing football is vital. And if it wasn't for Mark Travers' errors in Serbia, he realistically wouldn't have got the shot at Luxembourg. And who knows how it would have played out. Keller potentially was back for the next international window, so he starts. So you need that bit of luck, but he has been absolutely incredible. And look, we're talking about a 3-0 away win to Luxembourg, but 1-0 down. Are we winning that game 2-1? Probably not. Like, you know, so it was just it was huge from anything else on you want to come
just finally on that. I mean, you've got to remember Gavin Bazunu is probably at the best club in the world for, I suppose, academy football, for the infrastructure they have around the club. I know they were making sure he was getting his education in as well. I mean, Gavin Bazunu is at Manchester City, the best club for him, and that makes me even more confident about his development. And like I said, we've been blessed with goalkeepers in this country. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's, you know, the fact that, you know, we played a lot of GA or basketball, or you're just naturally hand-eye coordinated in this country. But we are blessed with goalkeepers.
And Connor makes a point that it could be like a Courtois situation where City give him a long loan deal. Incidentally, and I've spoken about this before in the podcast, Liverpool, there's potential that Keller could be in line for something like that, given his reputation. Because Adrian's well capable of doing that number 2 role, and give Keller 2 years at an Atletico Madrid. Obviously not as good a club as that, but you get the point.
Well, I don't think Liverpool fans would be thankful for you saying that about Adrian.
Well, sorry, that's true.
But I would say
he's done all right at times.
You look what Dean Henderson did. 2-year loan spell with Sheffield United, got them out of the Championship, year in the Premier League. So, like, Gavin Bazunu, it'll be a long time before he ever plays for City in a competitive game.
I don't think he might not ever, but it could be. But then Pep won't let him go, you know. So, but
what I would say is to be a star around his name, certainly on the Manchester City system, because he, like I said, you know, we could harp on about him all night, but I think he's really destined for good things in the game. And
yeah, cool. We've spoken a lot about Kenny, and we've kind of covered the match in a small bit of detail. And before I move on, we move on to tonight's action, which a lot of people watched earlier in terms of England San Marino. I know there's a few points you want to make, Sean, on international football. one thing you mentioned there, the League of Ireland background that a lot of these players have, and you take Gavin Bazunu as an example, made his debut, I'm going to say 16 at Rovers, but is it 15 or 16?
I think it was 16.
16. And it's, League of Ireland player. A lot of these players have League of Ireland background, and I don't know if it was a bad, it's tough to pick up a pundit up on this comment, but like Liam Brady saying, he's their man, he's their man, as in like the League of Ireland fans man. I don't think, and it's tough because Liam Brady was an absolutely phenomenal footballer, but I did find some of his punditry a bit. I almost felt he was willing Ireland not to win. I almost felt that he didn't want this experiment to work, and we all know the reason why, and it's because he was involved in Trapattoni's management team, and Trapattoni's management team that got Ireland to the Euro. I think he was involved after Euro 2012. But the point on that is, Trapattoni never bigged up the Ireland players, which means Liam Brady never bigged up the Ireland players. There was never a system to play football properly. It's like, what else am I meant to do with these players? And now he was a manager here with definitely less talented players than we had back then. You had the likes of Robbie Keane, Richard Dunn, Shay Given, Damien Duff at the twilight of his career. And Stephen Kenny's bigging up these players. And yes, we got a bit lucky in Luxembourg, and Brady's right, but we're starting to play a bit of football, but also we're trying to play a bit of football. And like I mentioned at the top of the show, it's not just the football we're trying to play, it's a team you can get behind. And it's a management team you can get behind, because we're big enough players. And that's very important to me as a fan. I think it's very important to a lot of people as fans. But I don't know. I feel a disconnect with what Brady's done in the past and what he's winning this Irish team to do. I don't get the sense that he obviously wants Ireland to succeed, and I genuinely saw his delight when he was talking about Bazunu in particular. But I know a lot of people weren't too happy with the punditry. It's important to talk about it, but I certainly was one of them. In fact, I thought it was a frustrating watch. I know you didn't watch halftime, but I thought halftime was particularly because while Richie Sadler was talking about the Irish penalty we had, Liam Brady was talking about the penalty Luxembourg should have had. Little things like that I don't know. I didn't feel. I think he should have been called up on it a small bit more. But
well, look, with someone like Liam Brady, I think, I don't necessarily disagree massively with his idea of, let's have in the 6 games, because I do think it makes logical step. Now, I personally, if I was in charge of the FEI in their current situation, I think Stephen Kenny would get a contract within, the next couple of weeks. But I don't necessarily think it's the worst position. Stephen Kenny is he going to get a job offer from a position that would persuade him to move away from the Ireland job? It's a debate. It's a debate that England are having as well at the moment with Gareth Southgate. Gareth Southgate's contract runs to the next end of the next World Cup, I think. Do you go and give him a big contract now? Do you, let it play out? What's the point in giving him an extended contract? Personally, I would give Kenny a contract. I understand the ideas of it. You give him, it's kind of swept under the carpet, if you like. He's able to proceed forward without any caution. But people have to remember that his whole tenure hasn't been a success yet. We've had a good end to the last couple of games. The real difficulty will come when we, not particularly the Nations League game, although you could pick up a couple of difficult games there. I think at the start of the next qualification campaign, those first 2 games of the campaign, we have to be in a stronger position than when we started. But people have this idea that you can't say a bad word almost about the Stephen Kenny era, if you like, right? And Liam Brady, albeit maybe has probably missed the national mood, if you like. He's got his opinion on it, and it doesn't necessarily make a huge amount, and not make a huge amount of sense, because you get to see the next 6 games. You get to see if Ireland can sustain this, and then you're in a position to give him a contract. Like I said, I would give him, Stephen Kenny, the contract now. I think he is the right man to move us forward, but I don't necessarily get the huge clamor around Brady's opinion.
No, well, I do sort of get the clamor, and the reason is, like, this is a unique situation in the sense that this is a manager again trying to build. What you do is, firstly, you instill confidence in his management team and what they've done, because like you mentioned, the results haven't been amazing, yet you're showing that yes, we're backing this to the end of the Euro 24 campaign. And what always tends to happen with new contracts, or you see it with Aubameyang and Ozil, you see it with new managers as well. They get the new contract, and the first couple of games there's an inevitable dip, or subconsciously there's a bit of a dip. you play for that dip almost with the Nation Leagues game. It's not like we've got 6 qualifiers and then the qualify. I understand the Nation League is, somewhere between a friendly and qualifying. But I do really think for those 2 reasons, again, the first one being that you instill that confidence and this belief in this management team that let's go forward. It ends all the talk, because unfortunately, if the new contract wasn't given and we lose 3 of our 6 Nation League games, then it's a, do we give him a new contract? Do we not? You give him the contract, we lose 3 of our next 6 Nation Leagues game, but Stephen Kenny's brought more young players through, or he's trying, and there's times during those games where we played decent enough football that you can say, yes, that's fine. But there's no talk of the manager then, because he's got a contract to the end of 2024. So I think in this occasion, while I accept some of the points that you're saying and what Brady's trying to say, I fundamentally disagree with it. I do think that this is a unique situation, which is why people are so angry that someone like, let's be fair, like Brady, look, he had to kind of ask Sadler about Jason Knight's how he got injured. Oh, was it tackled by the manager or something, wasn't it, Richie? Like, yes, it was, Liam. It's everyone knows that. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I don't know if he's watching as much of these players. I'm talking about the Ireland players here, not Premier League football, as much as other pundits are and other fans are. So I do think while he's an incredible footballer, was an incredible footballer, I've never really minded him on the panel, to be honest with you. I thought he brought a good style of punditry, particularly with John Giles and Eamon Dunphy. I do think he's missed the boat big time here, because he's missing that bigger picture where if you back this management team now, you get everyone united behind it, the 1 or 2 people on the fence going, well, he's got a contract to Euro 2024. What are we going to do about it? Let's just get behind the team. So I do think he's missed a couple of those points there.
But I think the key point remains, because I was listening to a discussion on, like I said, whether Gareth Southgate should get his England contract or not. And there's pros and cons for either side. What I didn't get was the kind of the pure kind of anger that came out against Liam Brady for having his opinion. Like, what I would say to that is, people can't forget that, Stephen Kenny's had a really difficult time. A lot of things have gone against him. You can make a lot of excuses for, COVID breaches. There was that whole debacle with the England game at Wembley that, we should never have played them in a friendly in the first place. And then the resignation of Alan Kelly, Damien Duff from his backroom staff. So Kenny's had to build it, but it hasn't always been smooth sailing. So I don't think Stephen Kenny would sit here and maybe be annoyed that if he wasn't, the contract wasn't extended to the end of the next 6 games. I think what Stephen Kenny knows, he knows at the moment he's got the backing of the FAI. They've kind of stuck with him. There was talks of whether he should be relieved of his duties after some of those games, but they've kind of weathered the storm slightly. But it's almost like we've kind of brushed it under the carpet. It still hasn't gone away, the demons. Like I said, the crunch games will come when qualifications on the line, and so I don't think at the moment there should be a huge clamour if they don't give him a contract within the next few weeks.
I think there should be, to be honest with you, because it's a massive opportunity to 100% back this management team and say, right, this is what we're doing to the end of Euro 2024. I guarantee you Michael O'Neill would have gotten contracts ahead of time when he was at this exact point with Northern Ireland. It's a massive opportunity to say, this is what we're doing. It's a non-negotiable. We don't care what's going to happen in these next 6 Nation League games or friendlies, whatever we have. Stephen Kenny's our man for the start of Euro 2024 qualification, and until we can't qualify, he will remain as the manager. And I think this particular moment, given the young players we've brought through, like Gavin Bazunu, Jason Knight, even the likes of Josh Cullen, he's found partnerships there. Like we've all talked about, all the positive things that we talked about, Sean, I think it's critical that the FAI give Stephen Kenny a new contract within the next few weeks, because otherwise you're saying, like, do you really back here? Like, what's the alternative? Everyone's saying, yeah, or Liam Brady's saying, well, who's Stephen Kenny going to go to Man United? And he made that, I don't know if you saw his late show appearance, but I thought it was pretty, I'm struggling to find the word. Like, there's a Dublin taxi driver there. He was bringing him into it and saying, well, who's he going to manage Man United? There was a kind of condescending tone to what Liam Brady was saying. I feel like he doesn't respect Stephen Kenny's achievements and what he's done at management level. And again, I go back to his Trapattoni days, and I think that is playing a small part in what he's saying. But I would disagree entirely. I think it is critical for this team going forward. Stephen Kenny gets that new contract. We all just stop talking about his new contract. Because if we'll spend the next 6 games talking about it. If we lose our next 2 games, we'll spend.
But what if he gets the contract and performances dip, or a couple of issues arise, and all of a sudden you're, this is all what if. What if they
Well,
give him a new contract? What if we have difficulties?
Well, if we have the difficulties and we've given him a new contract, then we're back on the manager here. So we're talking
But
about
are we not back to where we were after, say, the Luxembourg game and a couple of those games during the summer,
no,
where
because
people are kind of on the fence?
we have good performances now to go back to. We have the Luxembourg game, we have the Portugal game, even the Serbia away game, that we have positive performances to fall back on. At the start, like Stephen Kenny didn't have one win in his first 15 or 16 games, whereas now we have these performances to go back to. That there is there's positives here. Just because we lose the next two games doesn't make these games irrelevant. Like, we did draw 0-0 to Portugal there on Thursday.
Like I said, I think I would give him a contract if I was in their position. But I think if you're looking at theirs, I'm just making saying an excuse maybe for them if they don't give him a contract in the next few whiles and they kind of push back the decision. If you take his whole tenure at the minute as a whole, which I think would be a fair enough assessment, I don't think you'd be automatically pushing the button to give him a new contract when you could wait and see 6 games come down. There could be an opportunity where in 6 months' time a manager appears that maybe would suit the Ireland position more. We just don't know what's going to happen. But like I said, I think Kenny is going to be a successful manager with Ireland. But I'm just saying, if the FAI don't give him the contract, I don't think there should be a huge amount of clamour, because if you take it overall, his tenure, which I think is, like I said, a fair metric to do, I don't. There's been some really low points there.
It's a fair metric, but if we'd reverse engineer for a second and we started with these positive results and ended with negative results, you'd be having a different conversation. In fact, you'd be saying it's probably time for Stephen Kenny to go. But it's gone the other way, where the performances by and large have shown a small incremental improvement, and therefore, while you should take it at the whole campaign as a whole, let's be fair with the players he's bringing through. I think it's more than fair not to count the early games and say, well, this is where we were. Stephen Kenny's bringing us to here. Let's properly back him now and say, we actually back what we are trying to do here and bring us to. I would refute the manager system 100%. Like, I cannot see another manager. There is obviously another manager that will manage this Irish team after Euro 2024. And I'm not saying for a second Stephen Kenny's the only man for the job. But right now, given his relationship with the players, given what he's trying to do with Irish football, and given his removal of his own ego as well, I do think at the moment he probably is the right man to bring this group of players. In fact, he is the right man to bring this group of players forward.
The one thing I would say is I envisage the FAI giving him the new contract, and one of the reasons they'll give it to him is it's like everything. If they don't, say for example we get to after the 6 games and maybe they don't renew his contract further, I think then it's like the Glazer situation at United. All the attention will go from Ole Gunnar Solskjaer onto the Glazers. And what would happen at the FAI if they didn't give him a contract the attention goes from Stephen Kenny and the men's national side into the FAI and into Ruud Doctor, and almost as a whole into Vera Pauw and what's happening with the women's side. And we haven't qualified for a major tournament, between the men's and women's in a few years. So I think that's what would happen. So I think it's the easy decision for the FAI to kind of, while there's a groundswell of support, is to probably give Kenny the contract now, which I think, like I said, I would give it to him. I think some of the points you raised are right. I do think he's got the relationship with the players now. But if they didn't, I don't think I would be hugely annoyed. But, I'm certain there would be certain people.
To finish, I think I agree with you. I think you will get a new contract, and I agree with you as well. I think you should get a new contract. But I think where you disagree is, I do think the clamour would be justified, or the outrage, if he didn't get a new contract before the next game, because I just think there's no better time now, given how we finished the campaign. And if you want to look at the group in an overall sense, we did finish third, albeit, I understand we only finished on 9 points, but to be fair, we didn't have a 6th place team, so that's essentially 15 points we finished on. So we're not I know we're 9 points off, I think, or maybe 8 points off second place, but I do think Portugal and Serbia were superior. It will be interesting, Euro 2024 qualification, how that's all going to work.
But
that's going to be a bit of crack in fairness with the Nations League, right? We need to do this in the Nations League. Wales have a World Cup playoff spot, I understand, from the Nations League.
Yeah, I think I think the Nations League is quite big for Ireland, because I had a quick look through who we could potentially get, and I mean there would be some pretty tasty fixtures in the Aviva. You know, I think what it is, there's 4 teams in the Nation League B. We're in the B. I think you can get teams from 1, 2, 3, 4. Ireland are placed at the minute in pod 4 and pod 3. So, for example, Scotland are in pod 2. You could get Finland. I think Albania are in pod 4. You've got Iceland, Sweden. So there would be some pretty tasty games there, and some games that Stephen Kenny will be looking at, and ultimately be thinking we've got to win some of these games. So there's a lot of big games on the horizon. But like I said, you know, Ireland and Stephen Kenny, I think ultimately, I don't think we can sit here at the end of another campaign and, for example, Ireland not qualify for the Euros, or, you know, we haven't qualified for the playoff, or we haven't given ourselves the best shot. So I think that's the key for Kenny, and whether it's via the Nations League, but I think ultimately those qualification games in the group, those first 2 games are normally in pods of 2, sometimes 3. Hard to know with the World Cup, and then the calendar's all mad ahead with the November World Cup, December World Cup. But those first couple of games are crucial of the European qualification. And I think the whole thing is about getting our eggs in the right basket for that.
Yeah, barring extenuating circumstances, I think Euro 2024 qualification is a non-negotiable, just considering, you know, how many we got? 52, 53 European nations, including San Marino, which we'll get onto in just about a minute. You know what I mean? Including Andorra, probably harsh on Andorra, they beat San Marino. You know what I mean? 24 teams qualify. We've got the Nations League. Initially, we've got the Euro qualification, and then we've the playoff where we might get back in on the Nations League. So I do think, extenuating circumstances aside, terrible injuries or a really tough draw 4 or 5 times in a row, that we've got to qualify for Euro 2024. And what a moment that would be, just not to get too carried away here, to have a Stephen Kenny side. And we've always had great Irish support, and we always will, but I did think there was something ever so slightly different. The manager's name being sang like that, I don't think I ever heard that on any of the management as Jack Charlton, until Jack Charlton days. So yeah, you wanted to speak a little bit on tonight's internationals. You're a bit frustrated that you're thinking something like a pre-qualification work. So just to paraphrase what you said to me off air, Sean, you're frustrated that there were 2 incredibly great games today. And just to get carried away for a sec, Portugal, Serbia, unbelievable finish. Mitrovic drinking the Coke, going back on the pitch. That's brilliant. The World Cup qualification isn't broken. 32 teams, it's a brilliant system. Euro 2024, there's 24 teams. You can get carried away a bit, but you're frustrated that there was Scotland, Denmark, incredible game. Not everything on the line, but a great international. Northern Ireland versus Italy, everything on the line. Not as good a game, but Italy couldn't get the job done. But then we also had the game that I had the misfortune of watching, 90 minutes of San Marino 0, England 10. What's the solution to that? What's the solution to that? Leaving Arsene Wenger's international idea aside, which we could get into on another podcast probably.
Well, what I would say is, you mentioned there the World Cup qualification isn't broken, but yet they're changing everything about the World Cup. They're moving it to November and December. I think, I'm not 100% sure of whether it's confirmed, but there's a plan for 48 teams. There's a plan for a biannual World Cup. So what isn't broken is trying to be fixed at the minute for some reason. But what I would say is, the international window gets a bit of a bad time. I think it rightly does when you get to March and there's only a handful of playoffs, and you know, you're watching 2 meaningless friendlies for Ireland, for example, and you know, God knows who we're going to play in that time. I actually wouldn't be surprised if we maybe played in England again. So tonight I watched the first half of Scotland Denmark. I thought it was a really good game. A win for Scotland has, you know, all but confirmed a home playoff for them. And there was a brilliant atmosphere at Hampden Park. It was a really good game. Denmark have had a brilliant campaign. Before that, they had won 9 for 9, and they conceded very few goals after their European semi-final. Getting to the semi-final, they've been a really one of the hottest teams in Europe. Then I watched, you know, once I started hearing that Italy were on the, you know, needed a goal against Northern Ireland, I turned that game on, and there was an unbelievable atmosphere at Windsor Park for a game that meant nothing to them really, and for a manager who's kind of struggled and had to kind of get off the come down from the Michael O'Neill days he gave them, and how lucky they were in that game against Switzerland, for example, in the World Cup playoff. So there was a lot of that, and then obviously you turn on England San Marino and it's 10-0, and England, have played Albania and San Marino in the two games, and that's no disrespect to Albania, who
are pretty. Brian Kerr was bigging them up in commentary. That was a freak result for them, the 5-0. But
exactly, and it was 5 first half goals, and they're going to be a potential opponent, I think, for Ireland in Group B. So you're looking at that, and what has come to me, and I only saw a tweet from Miguel Delaney. It's the first time seeing it, that he has a similar kind of thought around this. That at first you think about the Six Nations in rugby at the moment and how everyone is, undecided as to whether Italy in the rugby should be in the Six Nations or should they have a kind of a pre-qualification tournament. And I certainly think at the moment, San Marino and Liechtenstein and Gibraltar, these, I don't know, although Ireland only beat Gibraltar 1-0, they're at nothing at the moment, and I don't think they're improving. And I think a lot of the qualification groups, some of them are coming down to actually how many goals you can score against them. And if you get 9, you're going to have a better goal difference, or if you get 10, you're going to have a better goal difference. And I think something has to be done. To be honest, I think something will be done, because I don't think you can keep going through international breaks, for example, like the one England have had where they win at 15-0 between the two games and they haven't had to really get out of second gear. And Germany beat, I think it was Liechtenstein the other night, 9-0. So it's quite widespread, and it's always happened. This has always been a problem, and these sides haven't really progressed. Certainly the lower tier, the mid to lower tier teams, like your Albanias, your Gibraltars, they seem, even Luxembourg, they seem to be improving all the time. So I do think that bottom pot of teams, I think they could get rid of them. I think they could condense the group stages down further. I think, as opposed to, I think it's 8 groups at the minute, maybe they could have 6, and they could run off and have a little bit more jeopardy if you're the third best team, or similar to what they had in the old Heineken Cup in rugby, where you're looking to make sure you get through to the next stage. Because at the moment there's not a huge amount of jeopardy. But that being said, over the last couple of nights we've had some brilliant games. Serbia and Portugal the other night, Italy and Northern Ireland. You're following that Switzerland game and you're thinking, are they going to score? And international football will always have a place. I think we're very lucky in this country that the men's and women's national sides are very well supported, and there's a real feel-good factor. They are the nation's team, I think. For all that rugby's done in the last couple of years, I do think that there's no show like when the Irish national side are playing. Even just from my memories in school, particularly, when Ireland were playing a big game, whether it be that day in school or the following day, all you were talking about in the match. But I do think that the whole international system that sort of pot needs to be changed. I think the whole fixtures during COVID, I thought was the big show from UEFA, that they didn't really care about player welfare or anything, and they were putting on extra games during 3 games during the international break.
Windows,
when you think now, there's only been 2, and I know some of the Ireland lads, because they played on Sunday night, will have had a day off today, and I see John Egan's back in Cork, and I know other players are back in Dublin. Whereas, to think they would have to play tomorrow night, to play 3 games in a window,
and we got shafted with that 3-game window, which started with the Portugal away and ended with Serbia home, or wasn't it? Yeah, and Azerbaijan at home in the middle, if I'm remembering that window correctly. 3 big qualification games in a row with Ireland's squad. It's frightening. A couple of things you said. It's funny you mentioned Gibraltar and Ireland beating them 1-0. Ireland's passed the ball more. 4 of Ireland's 5 most ever passes in international games were under Stephen Kenny in away competitive games, and the only other one is under Mick McCarthy with Ireland against Gibraltar. So Mick McCarthy's teams
on the second runway in Gibraltar Airport.
Well, they were passing the ball on the runway, in fairness to them. So who says Mick McCarthy's team don't get the ball down and pass it a few yards? It does remind me a bit about the GA, in terms of we're having the same conversations about those teams. In terms of pre-qualifying, if you did that for the Euros, you'd end up with 24 teams coming from maybe 44 or 45. So that would make an absolute mockery of the Euros. So maybe they might just bring it in for the World Cup and just exclude those teams. It's interesting, and coming to Emmett's question in a second, because at the moment it's around, in and around, I'm not 100% sure, at the 14 spots, I'll Google it when you talk, Sean, from Europe get to the World Cup, which is why it's so hard to qualify from Europe to the World Cup, like why Portugal are going through playoffs now, and Italy, the Euro 2020 champions, have to go through the playoffs because there's not enough spots really for Europe. And it's interesting, Emma saying thoughts on UEFA. Apparently UEFA, or the rumours are, I don't know if this is true or not, that UEFA are only getting 3 extra spots when the World Cup goes to 48 teams, which would make it still harder to qualify than the Euros, which is it's pretty interesting, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think the whole idea of a 48 team World Cup and the whole idea of a biannual World Cup, I don't think it's to grow the game in Europe or to grow the game among Eastern European countries, for example. I think the whole idea is to grow the game in the Middle East and places like Qatar and Jordan, these areas where there's a lot of money that is being pumped into football facilities. You look at the Saudi Arabian League, you look at Xavi, who was managing in Qatar, the UAE, and they've just pumped money into these countries. And the whole idea, I think, for the World Cup going to 48 teams is the more and more teams you can have from that part of the world playing.
Sorry, just on at the moment it's 13 spots from Europe for this World Cup. Just so you know.
And I think it wouldn't, when you're looking at a biannual World Cup, which is what Arsene Wenger wants now, I'm not sure how the biannual World Cup could become 48 teams. I think that would be something that would be pretty interesting to see how that would the whole system of it would work. I think time will tell with that. But the biannual World Cup, like I said, I don't think it helps Ireland in any way. I think it helps the bigger countries because they've a bigger chance of winning the World Cup. Players will get to play in more World Cups. But like I said, more World Cups mean countries like UAE, Qatar, those countries in Eastern European, Bahrain, or in the Middle East will pick up World Cup games, will pick up World Cup qualification, will grow the games there where rich people are investing lots of money into. So I don't necessarily think it's going to, like Emmett said, improve our chances of making a World Cup. The fact that it's biannual or the fact that it goes to 48 teams is not going to improve. It's not going to enrich the dream of a Luxembourg playing in a World Cup, or not going to enrich the dream of someone like that playing in a World Cup, but it's going to enrich the dream of a UAE or a Qatar playing again in a World Cup. So that's the whole idea behind it, I think, and that's why Arsene Wenger has got his job with FIFA. They are getting lots of money, and Qatar. Just remember with what happened with the Super League, and you look. Obviously, the two main teams who weren't a part of it at the time were Bayern Munich. Whoever knows that the fan model system, the fan-owned model system they have in Germany, and the hatred, for example, they have towards Leipzig and a few of the other clubs that are developing. And the other massive notable absent was PSG. And that's because PSG and Qatar have invested lots of money into FIFA and UEFA, and they weren't going to necessarily see the Champions League fall down because of a system where they could make money. Qatar really aren't in, the Qatari money aren't really in the game to kind of make money. They're in to show off Qatar as a global sport and hub, and they're trying to grow the game in Qatar. So that's the whole reason I think it's gone to 48 teams. It's gone to biannual tournaments, and that's why Qatar have got the World Cup. Like I said, it's not going to improve Ireland's chances of getting there. It's not going to improve Luxembourg's dream of ever playing there, or a Kosovo or Kazakhstan or someone like that. But if you're sitting in the Middle East, I'm sure you're going to have more World Cups than not. And that's where the whole idea of Ireland going back years, playing friendlies against Oman and even Qatar and all this sort of stuff. It's kind of what we knew was rotten. Now you're looking at it, John Delaney, I thinking, of course we played Oman, and of course we've done all these kind of things, but it's all been allowed. This whole idea of 48 teams of biannual World Cup is because it's been allowed to happen, that people have got their hands on football professionally, whether it's through UEFA, through FIFA, through Qatar getting a World Cup, between Man City being owned by the UAE or PSG being owned by Qatar, but football is just moving. It's almost moving demographics and geography by shifting right across to the Middle East, which will ultimately, I think, control football within the next few years.
Yeah.
And I agree with Connor's comment here. For those listening on the podcast, he says you can see it in every sport, same as Fury and AJ, two big British stars. Originally, the fight originally was scheduled in Saudi Arabia, and AJ's fought in Saudi Arabia. It's happening in golf. It's happened in golf for a long, long time. That the European horse racing, the European Tour has moved almost now to the DP World Tour, and you've slowly seen what was one of the biggest golf courses and the most prestigious golf courses in Europe, the Valderrama, have the final of the Order of Merit, slowly shift to Dubai, and everything like that has slowly started to happen. And you've got people like Greg Norman, one of the greatest golfers, involved with the Saudi Invitational, and it's slowly happened because that's where the money is and that's where the power is. And we've seen it. The Cricket World Cup was held in the UAE this year. Now, that was slightly different because COVID, they brought it there because they could host the players in these state-of-the-art hotel facilities, and they're being their own bio bubbles. And we've seen in the UFC on Fight Island. So that's where the sporting landscape's going, and it's just going further and further east to the Middle East.
Yeah, there's a whole podcast on that, but it is interesting what you're saying, that it doesn't start off with we're hosting the World Cup in Qatar in 2002. Let's slowly get our money in with Man City deals and a few other PSG deals, obviously, for Qatar. And here we are, and look, Arsene Wenger being involved in it. Look, at the moment, it doesn't fill me with any great. I don't know what the word is for it, but it is.
And if you don't
overthink about it, but
yeah, and if you're Arsene Wenger, and again, Connor Swartz has a commentator, they're buying out stars like Beckham to promote it. Like, if you're Arsene Wenger and if you're David Beckham, where you're looking and going, well, he's doing it, and Xavi's managing in Qatar.
It's the whataboutery. Well, it's like the Newcastle takeover. Well, City, and it's just you end up in a stupid argument that gets nowhere, and it ends up without two wrongs as opposed to one wrong and one right. You know what I mean?
And if you're a professional golfer and you're someone sitting there going, well, look, I didn't play in the Saudi Arabia International, but he's just got world ranking points and he's got, $1 million in his back pocket. Well, there's nothing stopping me doing it, because in 40 years' time, the world could be a completely different landscape where, there's no morals in the sporting world, if there is any now. So, you can't blame really people, if you like, for getting involved in this. Like, I'm not looking at Arsene Wenger going in any different way. Like, this is just, it's what happened. Do you argue Pep Guardiola, who has always kind of wanted to have sabbaticals and jobs, why is he staying on at Man City? Well, he's been looked after very well by Dubai, and that's the world we live in.
See, I do have to a certain extent, like David Beckham, for example. Like, Jesus, you are a rich enough man. Do you know what I mean? And I understand it's all relative when you get there. But look, I don't want to. I agree with what you're saying. I don't ultimately hold it good. I'm always.
What is it they say, that the first billion's the hardest billion?
Is that what they say? I hadn't heard that quote before. I'm sorry, I was going to say. Paul Casey, obviously, the poor lad stuck up for himself and said, "I'm not playing." Was it Saudi Arabia at the time? I'm not playing the Saudi Arabian Open, human rights record and all that. And then within 2 years, he's playing. So, and of course, he's getting all the stick for it, not the other Big Phil that's didn't care at the start. So at least Paul not pretended he cared, but tried to care, until ultimately, like you said, the world ranking points, cash, money talks, appearance fees for not turning up, where this money's coming from, human rights records and all that. It is important to talk about it, even at the end of an Ireland review. I don't know how we got called on that, but it's good. It's good to talk about it. Sean, anything else? Because I was going to keep it under the hour, but we're over the hour now. So any final thoughts on the international or anything? Or?
I must say, it did feel brilliant, and we've gone through the whole hour and we haven't really talked about Ireland beating the All Blacks as well. Like, I think it did the heart good the last couple of nights to see the Aviva rocking, with everything we've been through, and God knows what's going to happen this winter with COVID or whatever. But I think it proved how important the Irish support is and how much we get behind our teams and how influential they can be. We hosted, arguably one of the greatest players of all time and arguably the greatest team of all time in Dublin over the last couple of nights, and we were unbeaten. And I'm sure a huge amount of it was down to the Aviva Stadium. we are again very lucky. It's something I saw today that Ireland has for example, Croke Park is the third highest capacity stadium in Europe. And you think about the country we are, you think about our other infrastructure. We aren't anywhere near being the third best country in terms of transport infrastructure, anything else. But that, I think, it should just shows, how important sport is, and the fact that, the Aviva can be filled, Croke Park can be filled for a country of our size is, I think it did the heart well the last couple of nights. And, the Irish rugby team has got a lot of criticism, as someone who's not a huge rugby fan, you kind of look at it from the outside and so, well, if we are going to be the difference, the World Cup is where we're going to have to stand out. But, to beat the All Blacks is no mean feat. And for someone like for players like Johnny Sexton and Peter O'Mahony to be at that age, to have put the body through that much toll, and to still be out there performing, Sexton from the start, O'Mahony off the bench, is a credit to them. And like I said, to have Portugal and New Zealand in town the last couple of nights and not to be beaten, I think just shows you the importance of fans in sport. We mentioned Stephen Kenny earlier, fans in sport, and in particular the Irish support.
Yeah, I'd echo 100%. It's great to finally agree, Sean, on the topic. But even last thing on that, Ireland beat South Africa. I think that we beat South Africa by about 40 points in 2017, the Autumn Internationals, and 2 years later, we crashed out of the quarterfinal of the World Cup, having also lost to Japan, and they win the World Cup. So straight away, you try not to buy into the hype. But Jesus, watching the game was good enough. Then watching the highlights, I'm like, we absolutely battered New Zealand. There's no reason why we can't win the World Cup. And then I see Brian O'Driscoll saying it, and instead of saying what I just said 10 seconds ago, I'm going, no, you're spot on. We can actually have a team good enough to win the World Cup here. So you get carried away, and it's the hype. We're not used to being a good team in any sport. So, look, again, I'm almost disappointed myself because I really want to be that guy to the Ewan McKenna guy and stop it. But aside from Ewan McKenna, I think everyone else is kind of realizing that whatever happens, that was an incredible performance, and we've only beaten the All Blacks 3 times, I think. So
and I think as well, Dan, the last year, you take both these sides last year, under kind of new regimes, Andy Farrell, Stephen Kenny, and there was a lot of doom and gloom about Irish rugby, and a lot of people were saying we don't play off the cuff enough. It's too structured. The end of the Joe Smith era is probably similar to Martin O'Neill, where they had success, but in the end, the structure of it kind of just fell away. And I think that's a massive result, not only for Irish rugby but for Andy Farrell, and kind of similar with Stephen Kenny, where the rugby they played from start to finish was kind of electric. They were brilliant, kind of all 1 to 15, and similar in the football. And you do hope that now post-COVID they can have a kind of have the tail wag slightly and they improve. But there'll be no doubt, I think, whatever happens in the Six Nations this next spring, whatever happens in a couple of years' time, the key for Kenny, the key for Andy Farrell is the Euros in 24 for Kenny and the World Cup in 23 for Andy Farrell. And that's, hopefully we're sitting here in a couple of years' time, and we've had 2 really successful qualifying in the football, and the rugby getting past the quarterfinal stage.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. At Tackling Sports social media, do keep up to date. Next week we've got a Gers County final, so I think we'll be giving next week a miss on the Monday episode. So we'll be back in 2 weeks' time, and do, as I said, social media will be hopping still, because we'll still be watching all the sports. So do follow us: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all the usual places. We really appreciate you listening on the podcast. Preferential reviews on Apple are appreciated, and also subscribe to the YouTube channel. But yeah, we really thank everyone for listening to the podcast. Thanks for tuning in, on the comments and the live stream as well. And if you missed anything and you're watching on the live stream, it'll all be out tomorrow morning, first thing, as a podcast for you. So yeah, my thanks to Sean.
Cheers, Dan.
And yeah, for everyone else, enjoy the next couple of weeks of sports. We'll chat to you in 2 weeks' time. Have a great week.